Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. Most Democratic candidates are flocking to Nevada, where early voting is already underway. The state will hold its caucuses Saturday. That will be exactly 1 week after early voting started. There is growing scrutiny over the technology being used to tally results. The system was altered last minute in response to what happened during the Iowa caucuses. We'll have more on those changes later this hour. But first, recent polling in Nevada shows Senator Bernie Sanders at the top of the field. He holds a sizable lead over his closest competitors, former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren. However, there is a lot of focus today on a candidate who will not be on the state's ballot. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg is being criticized for his record and for his wealth. Our Major Garrett explains.
The American people are sick and tired of billionaires buying elections.
Bloomberg's approach seeks to turn the nomination process, with its emphasis on early contest and momentum building, on its head.
Jobs creator, leader, problem solver.
He's on track to spend more than $415 million before Super Tuesday. That's when he'll be on ballots for the first time and where he hopes to vault into contention for the Democratic nomination.
I think he cannot hide behind the airwaves and the money.
Bloomberg is also facing criticism for his support of stop and frisk. He has apologized for the anti-crime tactic that allowed police to search suspects without a warrant. From 2011 to 2012, more than 80% of those stopped were black or Latino. Nearly 90% were found to be innocent.
$60 billion can buy you a lot of advertising, but it can't erase your record.
Bloomberg is also under fire for lawsuits filed over the years alleging that he created a culture of sexual harassment at his company. In a statement, the Bloomberg campaign responded, quote, "Mike simply does not tolerate any kind of discrimination or harassment."
We in our party hold ourselves to the highest standard, and it is going to be critical for us to have a nominee who can authentically lead.
Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, seized on Bloomberg's past comments on stop and frisk.
The philosophy was to castigate and denigrate people of color,
ignoring President Trump's support for the practice, which he advocated for in Chicago in 2018.
Stop and frisk. It works, and it was meant for problems like Chicago. It was meant for it. Stop and frisk.
And for more, let's bring in CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett. So, Major, you reported on how Bloomberg is expected to spend more than $415 million before Super Tuesday. How is the campaign responding to criticism that he's, quote, buying the election?
The campaign's response is Mike Bloomberg has the resources and he's going to use them. And for Democrats who are weighing all of the available options and wanting to find someone who has the passion and the wherewithal to take on and defeat Donald Trump, the Bloomberg campaign says, well, we certainly have the wherewithal. It'll be up to you voters to decide if he has the message, the policies, and the passion. But clearly he has the resources and the resources to continue this campaign all the way through November. And with Mike Bloomberg pledging that he will do so whether he's the Democratic nominee or not, he's essentially advertising to any skeptical Democrat, by the nomination or not, I'm here to stay, and I might be your best alternative considering where the field is right now, to not just be someone who bankrolls Democratic campaigns up and down the ballot, but who leads the ticket.
Well, Bloomberg has until midnight tomorrow to qualify for Wednesday's debate in Las Vegas. He's not publicly focused on the Nevada caucus, but how likely is it we'll see him on that debate stage?
Well, it depends on if there's one more poll. And if there is a poll that is relevant to the Democratic National Committee rules, either a national one or in Nevada and South Carolina, he will qualify. And the campaign has said if he qualifies, he will participate. What's interesting about the debate is that it will occur on Wednesday. As you mentioned in the lead-in, Elaine, people began early voting in the caucuses on Saturday. So far, the statistics indicate 26,000 participated already, 56% of them first-time caucus goers. So some of that vote's already baked into the cake. The debate may not shift all that many attitudes. It's something that is worth pointing out in the context of the momentum that Bernie Sanders brought to Nevada. And I will say this one thing about the poll that we made reference to. It's a decent poll, good methodology, but polling in a caucus state, number one, notoriously difficult. And with this early vote, you have to ask yourself, how reliable can polling now be when it can't or won't capture some of that vote that's already in the system? So I would just caution about how solid these poll numbers are. Clearly, Bernie Sanders is perceived by all the other campaigns as the front runner in Nevada, and he arrived with momentum. But we should be cautious about any precise sense of precision coming from polling in a caucus state and one where early voting has already begun in earnest.
Yeah, it's a really important point. Duly noted, Major. Taking a step back, looking at the entire primary field, early voting has already started, as we mentioned, but how are we seeing campaigns make their final pitches there?
Well, it's all about proximity and all about being in Nevada. What I thought was most interesting today is Bernie Sanders wasn't there. He was in the Bay Area of California talking about the March 3rd California primary, by far the biggest delegate haul in all the Super Tuesday states on March 3rd, 446 delegates. Bernie Sanders believes he has got a leg up in California and wants to spend time there. Meanwhile, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, all blanketing the state of Nevada, trying to build not just grassroots support, but a sense of momentum to either keep their campaigns going in the case of Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, or revive them in some sense if you're Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden. All of them have a lot at stake in Nevada. Bernie Sanders probably has less to gain and more to lose, but certainly in a very advantageous position there. Everyone else is scrambling. One other thing to point out, Elaine, remember, Democrats allocate all of their delegates on a proportional basis by congressional district throughout the entire process. Let's think back to 2016. On the Republican side of the ledger, after March 15th, all the primaries and caucuses were winner take all. That allowed Donald Trump, with all the momentum he gained from the early contest, to essentially run away from it. There isn't that real potential. And with Bernie Sanders doing as well as he has and Pete Buttigieg leading in the delegate count, there's a real likelihood that contest by contest, with as many competitors remaining in the race, you have delegates being awarded piecemeal here and there, and no genuine momentum approaching the future contest. You get victories, but you still have to apportion delegates as those stay in the race. And if more candidates or the same field continues to stay in the race, that is going to complicate the math for everyone and make it difficult for anyone to break away from the field.
All right, I smell an upcoming delegate math segment for Red and Blue. Major Garrett, Major, thank you very much.
Sure.
For more, let's bring in our panel, Gabe Debenedetti and Nikolas Wu. Gabe is a national correspondent for New York Magazine, and Nikolas is a politics reporter for USA Today. Thank you both for joining us. Gabe, let me start with you. And Michael Bloomberg, we heard Major lay out how his campaign is handling this recent criticism, but here's what former Vice President Joe Biden had to say earlier today. Let's take a listen to that.
With regard to Michael Bloomberg with $62 billion can buy every ad he wants, but he can't, in fact, wipe away his record on everything from dealing with stop and frisk to his foreign policy assertions and the like. And, I'm looking forward to debating Michael Bloomberg.
So, Gabe, what kind of reactions are we seeing from the rest of the field?
Well, I think Joe Biden's reaction there was very telling. You've had a lot of the rest of the field try and figure out how to think about Michael Bloomberg for the last few months because they knew he was looming, but they didn't know exactly what that would look like. Now it's clear that he's running the kind of campaign we've never seen before, with more money basically poured into this out of his own pocket than anyone ever, it looks like. You've had other candidates, Bernie Sanders most recently, and Elizabeth Warren too, essentially saying, we can't have someone just buy an election. That's not democratic whatsoever. But now that there has been more scrutiny of his record on things like stop and frisk, a lot looking into the way that he talked about the Obama administration also in the last few days, you're seeing candidates come up with their own lines of attack on him, basically all in an acknowledgement that he is going to be a powerful part of this race moving forward. Remember, he's not competing in the first four primaries, but he's planning to make a major stand on Super Tuesday, which is right after South Carolina. So they are all now trying to figure out, well, just how much do we have to worry about this guy?
Right. Well, and Nikolas, I know you reported this weekend that Bloomberg is ramping up his efforts to court African-American voters. What do we know about the plans being implemented on the ground?
Well, Elaine, I think what we're really seeing from the Bloomberg campaign is just massive spending on ads and staffing in states all over the country. You know, Bloomberg has mostly avoided the early states and is going all in on a Super Tuesday strategy. And what we've seen the Bloomberg campaign do is pick up endorsements from notable members of the Congressional Black Caucus, as well as, I believe, over 100 mayors around the country, including notable African-American mayors, like, for example, Toni Harp, the first black female mayor of New Haven, Connecticut. So it really shows a concerted effort at outreach to the black community and ways to really boost support.
And Gabe, I want to ask you about Senator Bernie Sanders. I know you were asked whether you think he's a strong candidate. And what's your assessment when you look at the factors over the course of this field, what we've seen with the moderate lane perhaps consolidating?
Sure.
Where does that leave Senator Sanders?
Well, I think that if you're going to look at this and choose one candidate to be, you'd rather be him than anyone else right now, except, again, there's Michael Bloomberg with all his money. We just don't know about him.
Yeah.
But listen, Sanders obviously has basically tied in Iowa. He won New Hampshire, looks poised to win in Nevada. It's clear that though as Major laid out a few minutes ago, this is going to be a muddle for quite a long time because of the way that the delegates are apportioned. It's clear that Bernie Sanders is the person who has the likely, slight foot ahead of everyone else here. It's easier to see how he gains a plurality of delegates moving forward than anyone else. That said, it's obviously going to be a long race, and he's not, of course, in the position that Hillary Clinton was in 2016, or even that Donald Trump was in 2016. But it's clear that he is a frontrunner. The question is, if the moderates in the race do consolidate, if some of them drop out and one person does start to get a lot of these moderate votes, whether it's Pete Buttigieg or Joe Biden or Amy Klobuchar or anyone else, how that will work once it's more of a one-on-one matchup.
I remember being in New Hampshire last week and starting to see on social media, even as the New Hampshire primary results were still coming in Nevada, the Culinary Workers Union was circulating a pamphlet, and this was getting a lot of play on social media, jabbing Senator Sanders, some said. The union says, well, we're just sort of spelling out the facts as we know them. Can you talk a little bit about this? Does this have the potential to actually hurt Senator Sanders?
Absolutely. The Culinary Workers Union is by far the most powerful single force in Nevada politics. It has been known to really play a serious role in determining the winner, or at least the shape of the support for the ultimate winner of the caucuses in the past. Make no mistake, this was a specific jab at Senator Sanders and his Medicare for All plan specifically. The argument that the union makes is that they like their union negotiated health care and that they're worried that his Medicare for All plan would kick workers off of that. Obviously, his counterargument is, well, everyone would just get Medicare for All. Right. But this is a back and forth that's been ongoing for quite a few months now. I was at a town hall in Las Vegas that he did with these workers, and he was interrupted more than once by people basically demanding to know why they should support him if they already have health care that they like. That said, he's still a front runner here, and it's not as if the union has endorsed any of his opponents, simply tried to communicate to its workers, to its members, well, have some, there's reason to have some worry about this plan.
Interesting. All right. Meantime, Nikolas, former Vice President Joe Biden did not finish in the top 3 in Iowa or New Hampshire. Can you lay out the stakes for him heading into Nevada?
Well, for the former vice president, the stakes couldn't be higher. The Biden campaign was reported today that they're hoping for a second-place finish in Nevada to really start turning around the fortunes of the campaign. Whether or not happens has yet to be seen. As Gabe was talking about a few minutes ago with the Culinary Union, the fact that they decided not to endorse a candidate was some of a hit to the Biden campaign, who was hoping for something that could help give them momentum going into the caucuses. With such a relatively disappointing start so far for the Biden campaign, they really have to turn things around going through the next couple primaries and into Super Tuesday if they want to remain competitive.
Meantime, Gabe, former President Barack Obama has been notably silent on the issue of this Democratic primary. But I know you've been talking to Democrats close to the former president. What have you learned?
Well, this is all part of a tactic. For one, the former president does like not being in the middle of all this, and he does want, a new generation of Democratic leaders to step up and not rely on him so much. But a very specific calculation has also gone into this, which is that he and his people around him are increasingly sure that he's going to have to play a pretty specific role this summer in helping bring the party together,
because
whether
it's going
at
to
a
be
convention
so messy and
or not.
so ugly, right?
Exactly. Whether there are going to be different factions of the party going in different directions. He's someone who's sort of singular position to do that because of his stature within the party that no one else has right now. So as a result, he's hanging back. He's not saying anything. He's not weighing in. He's been very clear that he's going to support whoever the nominee is and campaign for that person in the general election. But he's not expressing any preferences, which sort of like the Culinary Workers Union endorsement is a little bit of a hit to his former vice president, Joe Biden, but it's also something that a lot of other candidates have been basically watching. They're not really sure how to feel about this because, of course, they all want the president's support, but there's no indication that any of them are going to get it anytime soon.
But he's been meeting with them in these quote-unquote office hours, right?
That's right. Yes, he met with basically all of them during the run-up to the campaign, and he has made clear to all of them that if any of them want to call him and ask for advice or need anything, that he is there to, answer their questions. Once people have dropped out of the race, he's then reached out to them again and said, thanks for running. Let me know if you want to talk through your future. And he's done that with a few of them, like Kamala Harris and Steve Bullock, for example. But as far as candidates currently in the race, he's only talking to them if they reach out to him. He's spoken with Bernie Sanders, for example, but for the most part, we don't know. It doesn't seem as if he's talking to the other candidates.
All right, at least that we've heard of.
That's right.
So interesting. Looking ahead, Nikolas, the South Carolina primary will be held later this month. Just 3 days later is Super Tuesday. A lot of the candidates have been hyper-focused on these early voting contests. Do we know if the campaigns are prepared for the race to broaden out?
Well, we'll really see how things go in the next couple of weeks. I mean, how they do in these next two early states will really show how much momentum they have going into Super Tuesday and the amount of money that they can raise before then, too, when you'll have to campaign in many more states than just two individual early states. So what we've seen some campaigns do is make announcements about staffing and additional campaign efforts and surrogates in other states. But it remains to be seen exactly how things are going to go as Super Tuesday comes up. It's still a very fluid race, and it's still anyone's game at this point.
Yeah, very fluid, and it would seem this is a pretty critical juncture that we're at for several of these campaigns. All right, Gabe Debenedetti and Nikolas Wu, thank you both very much.
Thanks.